Welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
And with just 12 days to go, we are counting down towards the general election 2024. And this week's show, if Simon isn't looking or sounding his best, it's because he's been chained to a mixing desk all weekend. A self-chaining, I would like to say. I wouldn't want anybody to think that I forced him into it. So our show, which was a great idea to give you the highlights from the 5 main parties' manifestos, one of us came up with the harebrained scheme of maybe getting some of the parliamentary candidates to give us the overview of their own manifesto. Is it time to fess up, Simon, that might have been your idea?
Yeah, well, I had a plan.
It was a great plan.
It was a great plan. I mean, it's better than standing in front of Downing Street in the pouring rain without an umbrella and trying to ask the country to love me. But
instead, you have chained yourself to the mixing desk in the blistering heat.
Yes, it was.
Ask the fans of Portsmouth Pompey Politics Podcast to love you.
Yes, yeah. Well, hopefully that. I mean, not really funny whether they appreciate it or not. It's done. And when we say fans, I don't know that we'll go as far as to say it in plural. Yes. So some bright spark, namely me, rather than thinking. Because assuming that it would be actually a complete nightmare of an idea to get 5 people from the 5 larger parties, according to most recent UK-wide polls, to come onto a live show would be an absolute nightmare to do. And in fact, we tried to do it last week when the manifestos were first released, and we literally had one nibble and not very much else of interest from anybody else. So we rescheduled it for this week. But we're still relying on them telling us about the manifestos, because we hope that they know their manifestos better and they can speak with authority as to and authentically about what bits they actually really kind of like about their manifesto, rather than just kind of give a rote press office speech. So I think that was kind of really powerful, rather than us trying to do some sort of analysis behind the scenes of what was in each manifesto, not as if we didn't have a spreadsheet and we didn't have a bar chart that showed us the relationship between words and pages in the manifestos, or indeed word clouds of the different manifestos, which were not necessarily exciting, but were revealing.
Exactly. So we've abandoned our own attempt to go through this, and I think if the TV debates have shown us anything, the fact that if you get more than a couple of people on the stage, it all becomes a bit of a zoo. So I think we are going to open up with our friends in Reform down in Portsmouth South, and I think Mark Zimmer was your guest, the PPC for Portsmouth North. South. Sorry. Oh, north-south divide confuses me at times.
Yep. Don't start that. So I shall play this, and then we'll have a quick chat after Mark. But what I will be doing, so with most of the other videos, I haven't had a chance to do this with Mark's because of the timescales with editing them today. Mark's I'll put out later on this evening in full. So the interview in full I'll put out separately later on this evening. For all the others, those are actually already out. So do go to our YouTube channel, our Facebook page. I'll try and put some links into the chat as we go along, so you can actually watch more or listen to more of the actual interview itself. But I've tried to trim these down so that they actually just focus mostly on the manifesto policies that they most like from their own manifesto, and some of them then have gone on to talk about how that impact, what the local impact for them is. So away we go.
I'm going to start off with law and order. Basically, it needs a urgent reform. Basically, it's like everybody says, increase the police numbers, but we need to increase the police numbers per capita. In other words, like 300 police to 100,000 people in the population. So that's over a course of 5 years. That'd be 40,000 officers. We don't accept that having a shoplifter go into a shop and to take, well, the shopkeepers take abuse, and not only that, they're taking produce and get away with it. Why? When did this happen? Who allows this to happen? So that is zero tolerance, antisocial behaviour. This infringes upon everybody else's lives. So when we say antisocial behaviour, that can be verbal as well as physical. Now, these should be dealt with, and the perpetrators, or the abusers, to be quite honest, should then serve a social service. They've got to spend their time putting something back into the community. By that, hopefully, then they'll start feeling part of the community again, because a lot of this is where everybody's stopped becoming a community. So that will help them and depoliticize the College of Policing. The police need to be separate. It's a separate entity. There's no bending of the knee. There's no wearing armbands, regardless of what armbands. The police are the police. And to be quite honest, they need to be respected. But to be respected, they've got to be looking the part and being the part. Physically trained, mentally astute, without being controlled by political parties. Is the uncontrolled immigration. It's not the immigration we're against. It's this mass explosion of the population. We can't assimilate everybody. We can't control our own borders. You know, going back to the previous on the crime and policing, law and order start at the border. No, we can't control our borders. That's when you stop becoming a country. Again, and with mass immigration, we do need immigration. There is no ifs and buts about it. I'm not saying I'm anti-immigrant. Crikey, my surname's Zimmer. 3 generations ago, on my paternal side, they come over from Germany. The reason we say stop the boats is to show that we are in control of our borders. But the French government has just been taking the money and it's been paying for their diesel to escort boats to our boats. But by law, they should stop them. Belgium do it, but the French aren't. But so yes, it would be pick up and take back. Yes, there'd be furore from the French, and there usually is. You do that every time you go away on holiday. Look at the queues. The French are the French. Obviously, immediately deport foreign criminals. Why should we taxpayers pay for somebody who's a foreign criminal to be in our prisons? But essential immigration does not come under what we're saying when we say freeze it. So I'm going to move on from that one. What we're saying is, in education, is let's just ban transgender ideology in primary schools and secondary schools. It's not needed. I think education, maths, history, English, we need to know where we come from, not where we think we might be going. Tax relief, 20% on all independent schools. Now, we should be encouraging, if you're in a position to pay for your child's education for the benefit of that child, then do it. But there should be we should be saying, well, thank you. That frees up our state schools. Our state schools are pretty good. Our teachers are working really hard, but our teachers aren't being supported. So, yes, it's state schools. If you get, for independent education, a 20% tax deduction, that frees up our state schools. Scrap the interest on student loans. It's crucifying everybody, and extend the payment period up to 45 years. Plus the fact, take away, or at least put in place, courses that are 2-year duration. Cut the funding to universities that undermine free speech. You should have free speech. Universities, that's where you should have debates. We're proposing that frontline staff, and that includes social service staff, frontline staff, don't pay their the basic rate of tax for 3 years. Where that money's covered from is there is so much wastage in the NHS, but at the end of the day, there's too many managers. We want more people, and rather than nurses coming in on a degree, train on the job. Independent healthcare capacity. Now, if somebody can afford, it'd be like with the education, if they can afford to pay for an insurance policy to have private health insurance, then again, they should be given a tax deduction for using that. Not everybody can afford that, but the ones who can afford it, I think they should be encouraged to do it, not penalised because they can. That frees it up for other people. Scrapping the net zero. Yes, we are aware and concerned about the environment. I've got 3 children, 4 grandchildren. So I'm not just doing it for me. This is not, I want money in my pocket. I want them to actually start from a firm base. So by ditching the net zero can save the public sector over 30 billion. Again, because we're not subsidising wind turbines, solar panels. We've got the energy there. Let's use it. We're just importing the gas because, as you know, when the sun doesn't shine, the wind doesn't blow. We still got to make a cup of tea. So it's scrapping the net zero, and employer immigration tax, which would boost. So if we've done that, then the employers will start looking to employ and train UK-based citizens. So the money saving there, or the money that will be made on adding that tax, we're looking at about we could raise more than 20 billion over 5 years to pay for apprenticeships. In fact, raise the basic rate of tax from 12.5%, which I think has been like that for the last 4 years, up to £20,000 before you start paying tax. Yes, that's a big sum, but that will be paid for by people who actually can get back into work. It make, again, you've heard it before, it make work pay. That will save like 15 billion per annum.
And the full list of candidates for Portsmouth South: for the Conservative Party, Signe Biddle; for Labour, Stephen Morgan; for the Liberal Democrats, Charles Murphy; for the Green Party, Elliot Lee; for Reform, Mark Zimmer; and for the Portsmouth Independence Party, Jacob Short.
Well, there you have it, Simon. A very comprehensive run through of the reform policies that Mark obviously spoke very passionately about. And, there are, as with all manifestos, there are some great ideas in there. I personally particularly like the raising of the income tax threshold, but there are some other ones in there I feel much more uneasy about, and I guess we simply don't have time. Neither is it right for us to dissect them. But appreciation to Mark Zimmer for giving his time to give us the reform point of view on there. They don't have a manifesto, do they? They have a contract.
Yeah, they have a contract that until Monday was a draft contract, and then became a non-draft contract. I haven't honestly done any analysis to see what were the bits that didn't make the final draft. That might be quite interesting. But yeah, I must admit there were some interesting things in there around encouraging people to work in the NHS or to stay in the NHS. And around forgiving student debt with those sorts of things, having shorter courses. So there's some interesting things there, but they're packaged up with some other things that might not be universally accepted, and I must admit I'd be concerned about some of them. So it's yeah, I don't know that
Yeah,
making life
yeah,
horrible for trans kids is necessarily a massive issue for anyone other than them. So why make it awful for them? And yeah, the abandoning net zero stuff, I don't know that really kind of works. But
yeah. I guess with any new party, Simon, who see themselves as disruptors, they're going to throw a lot of stones, aren't they? In terms of some of them will hit and some of them will miss.
through some windows. But I just didn't get a feel for. There was some headline grabbing stuff. There was some very what I think would be probably easy for people to latch onto and to find popular. But it was a bit, if I'm honest, it felt a bit slim on the where's the money coming from.
Yes, and I think independent reviews have so shown that I think Reform's agenda is over the 100 million in cost, second only in net cost to the Greens, which is where I think we're going next with Elliot, also from Portsmouth South.
We are indeed. So let's have some hear from the Greens.
The context behind the manifesto is all about the idea that we've had 14 years of chaos and that we really want to get the country moving. We want to get Portsmouth moving, and we don't feel like any other party is offering the ambition we need. So to start off with ambition, in our costings, we're saying we want a wealth tax on the super rich. So 1% on assets over 10 million and 2% on assets over 1 billion. Further, we want to make polluters pay with a carbon tax. We want to extend the cap on national insurance so that those earning over 50k are paying. And we want to equalize capital gains tax with income tax to make it more fair for those earning off investments. This ambition means we can fund the NHS. So that means 30 billion into the NHS and an extra 20 billion into NHS infrastructure. So that's dentists, hospitals, and GPs. We also want to restore junior doctor pay, and we're proud to be one of the few parties to offer that. Getting the system moving is important. So that's why we're also committed with social care to invest in another 20 billion. We want to fund and pay staff good wages. We want to give free personal care. And going back to the wages, we actually want to give people a £15 minimum wage regardless of age. So that means people can not only get by, but thrive. Further, to support the welfare system, we want to uplift the universal credit by £40 a week and introduce universal basic income so that nobody has to rely on a food bank. With jobs, we want to repeal the harmful legislation on workers being able to strike and demand better for their pay. Insulating homes not only creates jobs, but it brings down emissions, it brings down bills, because at the end of the day, the cheapest bills are those you don't have to pay. We're committed to building 150,000 new social homes a year. And we're committed to building them in the right place for the right price and right for the community. That means investing in local infrastructure. We're also committed in banning no-fault evictions and in protecting the supply of homes. We want to ban the right to buy scheme. For going back to renters, we want to bring in a renters' rights bill so that renters can demand for a safe place to live. And that means demanding for more action on insulation and tackling mold and damp. We want to commit 8 billion to schools and an extra 2 billion to teacher pay. We want to scrap exams, and we want to put a trained mental health professional into all schools. We also want to expand the curriculum on sexual education and other subjects that are really going to support today's youth in adulthood. And given it the ambition it needs, we want to invest 40 billion in tackling the climate emergency, given it the urgency it requires. That also means no new oil and gas licenses and taking energy companies into public ownership. And for nature, we want to take water companies into public ownership and invest back into them to stop the disgusting sewage going into our waters. And in the meantime, that might mean holding water bosses to account for crimes against nature. We think it's important that Portsmouth gets the homes that it so desperately needs, but that shouldn't be at the cost of our green spaces. Taking away green spaces is bad for our health, it's bad for education.
And the full list of candidates for Portsmouth South: for the Conservative Party, Signe Biddle; for Labour, Stephen Morgan; for the Liberal Democrats, Charles Murphy; for the Green Party, Elliot Lee; for Reform, Mark Zimmer; and for the Portsmouth Independence Party, Jacob Short.
Well, crumbs. I must confess I hadn't looked at the Green Party agenda, and thanks again to Elliot for giving us a comprehensive overview of its contents. And I guess I can see now why it's come out as the most expensive of all of the manifestos.
I think the interesting thing with the Green Manifesto is how much of that is is kind of probably actually fiscally it seems actually quite far left of actually where Labour and the Liberal Democrats are in the sense of kind of their social support mechanisms and state intervention mechanisms that they're talking about. So there's obviously, as you'd expect, a lot of a strong emphasis on environmental impacts and on environmental issues, but there's also some very, very strong measures for wealth redistribution.
Yeah, and I think that's perhaps where I was surprised. I felt the emphasis was very light on environmental, and was much heavier on the tax and spend, and the thought of the the opening conversation on the wealth tax and stealing money from people who haven't stolen it themselves but earned it. Yeah, you might imagine that had my eyebrows up over the top of my head at the very start there. But again, and this is where for me, politics is about principles and it's about the way of getting things done. And there is no hiding under any kind of bush or other greenery there. That extraordinarily strong, very heavy taxation and spending it elsewhere. So yes, I shall.
Yeah, there's I must admit, other views are available about that not being stealing, but that's just a mechanism for wealth distribution and a redressing of the concentration of wealth in a small number of hands. So
and I see that. I think for me a fundamental democratic issue is when the state decides that it can other than through taxation can basically take your property. Then it's one of the reddest of red lines for me. But as you say, obviously the Greens believe in it, so and they put it on Front Street.
About mandating ownership of properties over to the state. That wasn't there, and it's not in what I would read. But it's certainly worth anybody who wants to understand and see kind of in detail going and looking at the manifestos to see. And I think there's a wider debate here of when you're voting, are you voting for, because we don't have a presidential system, you're not voting for which prime minister that you want, although that's what's on kind of a lot of leaflets. You're not even voting for which particularly dodgy bar chart that it might have been produced on whichever leaflet that you're looking at. And you know, are you voting for the person that is standing in your area, or are you voting for the policies of that party? And in which case, I guess most people are having to do a balancing trick of, is there is the balance between the things that they're in favor of versus the things that they're really not in favor of in the, you know, is not offset by the things that they're really not in favor of in the manifesto. And I guess that's the thing. I think it would be strange for anybody to think that there will be a manifesto that they agree with everything in it 100%.
Yes, indeed. So in terms of our next manifesto, we are heading up the M27 to Fareham and listening and hearing from the Liberal Democrats.
We are indeed. So off we go to Merry Fareham, or Fareham and Waterlooville, as it is now.
Last week. There are a number of really key policies I'd like to emphasise, but I'd like to do that in the context of the Fareham and Waterlooville residents. We have placed at front and centre of the manifesto for the Liberal Democrats the health and social care policies, along with the cost of living and the environment. So they're the three main pillars of the Liberal Democrat manifesto. So we're committed to fixing the NHS, to protecting the NHS, and taking the money that is there in a much fairer way. We must start to invest more in our primary care and preventative health care. So if we can actually look after people and prevent them from going into hospital, prevent when they are diagnosed with cancer, ensuring they do get that treatment within the statutory days, and then thinking about the other end of the pathway, when you come out of hospital, the social care that you may need, and thinking about how do we make that function. People don't, you know, we've managed to put through some incredible reforms in Scotland around this. We don't want people to have to sell their homes to pay for their social care. There has to be a better way. And on that perspective, we are looking to invest more into the social care part of the pathway. So that's healthcare, and which obviously also covers NHS dentistry. And it is centre and forefront of what we want to do. The second area, and again, a really big issue for Fareham and Waterlooville residents on two sides, is housing. So we have literally got a lost generation now in this country of pretty much anyone under the age of 40, 45, and people above that age as well. We simply cannot afford to get on the housing ladder. The houses that they have built have been developer-led, often the wrong houses, in the wrong locations, and certainly at the wrong price. Their social housing record is appalling. So the Liberal Democrat, in terms of our manifesto, is committing to building 380,000 houses a year, of which 150,000 will be social housing. This will clearly be involving investment, and I'll talk about how we're going to fund this shortly after I've gone through the key manifesto pledges. And they want to work, and this is something we're already doing on the ground with our local Lib Dem councillors, as a community-led approach. So what we've seen to date under this Conservative government is they've let the developers dictate the terms. They've let the developers maintain their profit margins and not invest in the required infrastructure. So Liberal Democrats are committed to this house building programme, but equally we are going to be working with the community to ensure that the infrastructure is put in place so that people are much more positive about building in their area. And it's sensitive to local needs. But we have the sewage infrastructure, we have the schools, we have the doctor surgeries. The third area that is very important to the Liberal Democrats is the cost of living. And the cost of living is a crisis that is impacting everyone up and down the country. And as we know nationally, there are 3 million families living in poverty. That's, you know, nearly 1 million children. It is devastating, and we have to address this. So the Liberal Democrats are committed to ensuring that the windfall tax on the oil and gas companies is actually an ongoing event. It's not just a one-off. We really need to They've taken so much margin and profit in their oil and gas energy prices. And we're also committed to working, with local businesses on business rate relief and actually changing that whole way of charging local businesses in the high streets and how we can help them thrive. We pledged to lift the 2-child cap. This is what the experts say. It's the quickest, most effective way to lift children and families out of poverty. We'd love to do more in that space, but that 2-child cap is an Osborne initiative. Labour are committing to keep that in place. The Liberal Democrats are not. Our pledge is to remove that 2-cap policy. And it's the final area that's really important to us, the Liberal Democrats, and that's the environment. There's been over 800 sewage dumps last year, over 26 sites across the Meon Valley and the Fareham wards. That is nearly 9,000 hours of sewage just being dumped into our rivers. Liberal Democrats, the environment, the green economy, that is a really core part of our manifesto. And we look to be leading the way in the world around this. We commit to a net zero, and we want to be investing in skills and the right type of jobs that is going to lead the green technology revolution and innovation in this country. And the last time in the coalition, we were the ones, Liberal Democrats, who pushed for the wind farms. Conservatives stopped that when we left the coalition. So we feel passionate about this. We're in a climate change emergency and we have to address that, but we can do that in a constructive way that helps provide really exciting, well-paid jobs and make sure that the UK is leading in the green revolution going forward. So just a final point on, everyone says that's great. How are you going to cost this? You're spending 28 billion over and above other parties. We have a very, very detailed cost of part of our manifesto, and I'd recommend everyone to go and have a look at that. But I think the key thing here is that we are looking at fairer taxation across the board. We want those with the broader shoulders to actually take on a bigger share. We've created more billionaires in the last 3 to 5 years than at any other time in UK history. And we know that many of them are not paying their fair share of tax. We're going to reform the capital gains tax. So again, there's fairer taxation for those with the broader shoulders. We're going to be working with the larger companies to work on how can they actually contribute more as, these big offshore online companies. How are we going to tighten up those tax loopholes, that tax avoidance? We can't take people out of the fiscal drag, but we can start to halt that fiscal drag that is bringing more and more people on lower incomes into tax brackets, but also thinking about innovative, clever ways. So there's a share buyback tax of 4% that we propose to bring in for FTSE 100 companies. What's been going on, and actually really over the last 40, 50 years, is these larger companies are maximizing their profits, but then putting that into share buybacks, which means that they actually pay themselves. Often the chief executives will have massive share options in their companies. So they're almost essentially paying themselves these massive profits rather than investing them back into building more factories or more capacity or more productivity. I think, the Liberal Democrat vote is for a fairer, strong, Liberal voice at the national level in Parliament. It's about holding water company bosses to account. It's about holding people accountable and making sure that we actually all work together in a much more collaborative way to create a fairer, thriving society. Collaboration, cooperation, and a fair deal for all. So if you want to vote Liberal Democrat on the 4th of July, that is what you're voting for.
For the full list of candidates for Fareham and Waterlooville, for the Conservative Party, Suella Braverman, for Labour, Gemma Furnivall, for the Liberal Democrats, Bella Hewitt, for the Green Party, Baz Murray, for Reform UK, Kevin Chippendall-Higgin, for Rejoin EU, Edward Dean, and for Hampshire Independence, Robert Holliday.
Well, thanks to Bella Hewitt there for putting across a very strong case for the Liberal Democrats, and an interesting mix in there. There were some things in there again, some good ideas which I liked. I think that share buyback scheme, closing that loophole, I think that is that is a thing that should have been done a long time ago. Those who have followed the podcast for some time will know my thoughts on the NHS as being a bottomless pit of money that can never be filled. So that one didn't move me, but I did like what they were proposing in terms of looking at the building, and not just the building of homes, but the infrastructure to support that, because I think there is that piece where everyone sort of agrees we need new homes and more homes until it comes to building them, and then you should be building more, but not here.
Yeah, I think there is an element of kind of that tendency towards NIMBYism, and where everybody agrees that the houses should be built, but just nowhere near me. And you get the strange. There's the strange dynamic, isn't there, in places like Portsmouth, of which is an interesting playing out of some kind of easy national things. It's just there's too many people here. We're, short of like border control at Hilsey, then it's a popular place. People want to come live there. That means it needs homes. Families who've got children that want to move out, they want homes that they can move into and live in, and those homes have to be somewhere. And the battle for the city is, of course, on all sides for the island part of the city. It's water, so your options are kind of limited. But that is the kind of thing, is that it's the question of the right sort of homes, which I think kind of speaks to the top-down housing targets of, if you just let developers do what they want, then they'll just build the stuff with the highest margins and what's easiest for them. They'll skimp on trying to do the infrastructure, but then it kind of almost feels like they've only done that because the planning systems and mechanisms allow them to get away with doing it.
Well, indeed, and of course, with Waterlooville joining Fareham, there is an element of, probably over the last 10 years, Waterlooville has seen more than its fair share of developments of 3, 4, and 5 bedroom executive detached homes as where the developments have sprung up. And obviously Fareham, the well documented Wellbourne, which is was the new town that was supposed to be built at the back of Fareham, has wound its merry way probably over 20 years. So no, very real issue for Fareham and Waterlooville. And thank you to Bella for the insights. And I guess we must scorch back along the M27 and A27, passing by Portsmouth, and possibly because there's border control at Hilsey, and head off to Havant from our representative from the Labour.
Yeah, you can't. And as everybody knows, it's a struggle to get off on the Eastern Road. Yes, so Stephanie Harvey from Havant for Labour.
I'm really excited actually about our manifesto. We believe as a party that everyone deserves a government that will match your ambition, and that our manifesto will ensure that no matter what your background, you can thrive. I'm a teacher, so the big thing for me is education. I believe that education is the greatest leveller, and that it gives opportunity to people. And actually, in the constituency I'm standing in, which is Havant, we're looking at 55% of people living in deprived circumstances. And so I really am proud of our manifesto that will push and raise aspirations for people in Havant. So we as a party have committed in our manifesto to 6,500 new teachers in specialist areas, because we really think it's important actually that students deserve to be taught by teachers who are specialists in that subject. We have committed to 3,000 new primary school based nurseries, and again that's really, really important actually. I was door knocking on Friday and heard actually that there's a local nursery at HSDC that's closing, and so there's a shortage of nursery spaces for working parents. So again, I'm really proud that we're championing this, because we want to help people go to work. We want to make life easier for parents, and I'm hopeful that I can drive some of those spaces and creation of new nurseries into Havant. It's also really important that we're going to have free breakfast club spaces for all primary school children. We're seeing far too many children going to school hungry, and it's not acceptable in 2024. We also want high quality apprenticeships and specialist technology colleges. And again, this is really important. I've talked about raising aspirations. Aspirations don't have to look like A-levels in university. That's great for many students, but actually, there's some real shortage of skills that we have in the UK. And we're really proud as a party to be pioneering this. So this, of course, begs the question, how are we going to pay for this? You may well have heard that we will be closing the tax loophole on private schools. which will help fund all of our plans on education. Something else that I'm very proud of in our manifesto is the amount of, opportunities that we're going to grant people. And one of the key ones that we're going to do is we're going to enact a socio-economic duty in the Equalities Act. And that's really, really significant because we need to make sure that people from all backgrounds can achieve and can be prosperous in life. And so that's going to help make sure that no matter your social class, no matter what your background is, you can have an aspirational future. We also need to make work pay. And something that we're really proud of, again, as a party, is that we will make sure that we have right pay, we'll have protections for maternity leave, have menopause discrimination covered, and we'll take action to reduce the gender pay gap. This is really, really significant. Obviously, as a woman, it's a cause close to my heart. We shouldn't be working for less than men in this day and age. So again, I'm really pleased that we're going to make work paid for everyone. Something as a special needs parent that's also very close to my heart is further strengthening the rights of people with disabilities. And it's really important, actually, and this is something I'm very proud of in our manifesto, is that we will make sure that disabled people have full rights to equal pay, and we'll introduce disability and ethnicity pay gap reports as well. We'll also strengthen this by supporting disabled people into work if that's appropriate for them, by offering employment support and making sure that they have access to reasonable adjustments in the workplace, which is really, really important. Standing in heaven, one of the real key issues for voters is water quality. And again, this is one of my personal pledges to people in heaven, is that we need to sort out water quality, and we need to stop sewage discharges. So as part of our manifesto, Labour has committed to giving toothless regulators the powers to block payments to water bosses who consistently oversee filth in our waters. We'll also oversee repeated law breaking. Bosses who oversee repeated law breaking will face criminal charges. And this is again really significant because at the moment, quite often it's cheaper just to dump sewage in the water than it is to pay to dispose of it properly. So we need to make sure that we're closing this loophole. Something else that's very important is that we'll end self-monitoring for water companies. And significantly, we will make sure that water companies have independent monitoring of every single sewage outlet. This is significant because it means companies can no longer cover up illegal sewage dumping. Paling Island and Emturf are areas of outstanding natural beauty, and I'm really proud that the Labour manifesto will close these loopholes and help to protect these areas, and will also give severe and automatic fines as well to the big bosses, which again, I'm very proud to stand on that platform. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is energy. I think there's not many of us at this moment in time who haven't been impacted by the cost of living crisis and spiraling energy bills. And actually it's pushing many people into energy poverty. And so again, really, really proud, one of our flagship policies that we're running in the Labour Party is Great British Energy. So it will be a nationalised energy company. It will make Britain a clean superpower. And we know that this will cut bills, so people will have more money in their pocket. It will create 650,000 jobs, and it will deliver energy security with cheaper zero carbon electricity by 2030. Now, this will be paid for by a windfall tax on gas and oil giants, because we believe that working people should have more money in their pockets, and it shouldn't be, shareholders profiting at the expense of the everyday person. And again, something that I'm really proud of in this part of our manifesto is the commitment to create 650,000 new jobs. So we have a real opportunity here to be innovators, like with the COVID vaccine, for example, because if we don't innovate and invest in clean zero carbon electricity, we'll end up buying these solutions. So let's create British jobs and let's add to our economy. That's a really significant part of our manifesto. And the last point on this as well is that we have our warm home schemes. and this will help people to insulate their homes. Now, the way in which this is going to be paid for or funded is that there will be government-backed grants which will be available, as well as low-interest loans. And again, this is a short-term solution to spiralling energy costs. We hope the uptake on this will be great. We also know it has a positive impact on the environment. And those are some of my favourite parts of our manifesto.
The full list of candidates for Haven't. For the Conservative Party, Alan Mack. For Labour, Stephanie Harvey. For the Liberal Democrats, Gayatri Sathyaneth. For the Green Party, Nettie Shepherd. For Reform UK, John Perry. And for the Workers' Party of Great Britain, Jennifer Alamano.
Well, clearly, Stephanie very proud of the Labour manifesto, and very interesting when you look against the Reform and the Green manifesto. It sounds more conservative than the Greens. It's almost the mirror image of Reform in terms of some of the policies tackled there, and again some really good stuff in there. I think the ending the loophole on public school fees is something which I think most people wouldn't have been aware of, that school fees are considered a charitable donation and therefore tax deductible. So kind of not really any issue with that, to be fair. But I think, as with the GB Energy thing, it all sounds perfectly sensible. But I guess when I look at things like HS2 and big aspirational capital projects like that, which will end up with 650,000 people paid by the taxpayer, there's a bit of me, maybe I've been burned by Victory Energy, Simon.
Well, see, this is the interesting thing that I haven't quite managed to understand. Is because Victory Energy, which was the energy company that Portsmouth City Council under a previous administration tried to set up, that was essentially just an own brand version that would be operated
a reseller.
Basically a reseller. And at the end of the day, all energy retailers, the people that you actually pay your electricity bill, they're all reselling energy that they're buying on the market. So their administrative and processing costs are kind of contributing to that, but there isn't really kind of much in that, and therefore they don't have much control over price. So I'm assuming they don't mean setting up an energy retailer, and in which case, okay, are they talking about setting up an energy a distributor, basically, and a company that actually creates and maintains a network? Well, there already is one, so I don't know kind of where the scope is for that. There isn't a part of the country that doesn't have a network operator, and if they're talking about generation, then okay, actual generation, actually making the energy, that's great, but you'd sell it on the open market. So I don't know how that in and of itself would bring down bills. So I'm if I'm honest, maybe I'm reading too much detail into that, and but I don't kind of get how that in and of itself works. If, however, though, it's a vehicle of leveraging investment into the parts of the infrastructure network and into parts of generation that could do with investment in the UK, then okay, that kind of makes sense. But it's not an energy company, probably in the way that most of the people hearing it would understand an energy company to be. And also this thing about our energy will be secure because we won't have to buy stuff from Putin. But anybody producing energy, whether that's from burning fossil fuels or from a wind farm, is selling that on the open market. They're not. Yes. This is only for the UK. This shelf is for the UK only. There's none of that.
Yeah, no, I think, like you say, lots of complexity in there. Just one quick shout out to end on the positive note. I think the stuff around disabled people and supporting to work, very positive about that. It's an area which I work in, and I'm very pleased to hear disabled people mentioned positively within an agenda rather than in the way they are in some others. So I guess last but by no means least, a bit of a coup for the podcast. We've we make no secret of the fact that we have probably for over many years have tried to get both the standing MPs for Portsmouth to come on the podcast without success. But you finally cracked the code, Simon.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure friend of the pod Joe Stanton may well indeed have had a hand in it, but it certainly is a fantastic contribution to have Penny Mordaunt interviewed by the pod. So let's play Penny's contribution talking about the Conservative Manifesto.
Our national manifesto is really all about security. It's about financial security. We've been through a really tough few years. We're still dealing with the legacy of COVID. The world is a very unsecure place. There's lots of shocks going on all over the world that are affecting people's finances. So we think that is the top priority. It's cost of living issues. We're doing well as a nation. We've come through that tough time. We're outperforming the United States on growth. We're outperforming many countries in Europe and the Eurozone on growth, but also on inflation. We're the first country to have beaten the inflation issue. That's fantastic. It shows how stoic we are as a nation, how strong we are as a nation. But we've got to keep that recovery going. And what will choke off that recovery is if we saddle the wealth creators, the opportunity creators, our businesses and households with higher taxes. So the central theme of our manifesto is lowering those taxes on your work, taxes on your home. We're going to ensure that pensioners don't pay any tax on the state pension, lock that in indefinitely. That's really important. We have for low and middle income earners the lowest tax burden since 1975, but the overall tax burden is high. And if you look at our spending plans, go and look at Ed Conway's graph on Sky, you'll see that at the end of the next parliament, the tax burden is coming down quite steeply. For Labour, it's going up to an all-time high. That's not how you grow the economy. We need to keep taxes low. And we need to also make sure that taxes like fuel duty, we've held that down, frozen it for 14 consecutive years. Labour have put that up every year that they have been in office. We've also got offers in our manifesto to, again, help household incomes. A childcare package, for example, that's worth about £6,500 to most families. But security isn't just about that financial security and giving you more liquidity and disposable income. It's also about defending the nation. The equipment program and our defence budget requires us to be spending 2.5% by 2030. So that is what we will do. We're the only party that is committed to that. Labour haven't committed to that. And you need to commit to that if you're going to fund defence properly. Really important to our city. We also need border security. We will give on legal migration Parliament the powers to produce an annual cap on family and work visas. And that will be informed by what the nation needs with regard to its workforce and shortages in particular professions, but also the burdens that puts on housing stock, on our public services. So we've got that balance right, annual cap that will come down every year. And on our current policy, we should be halving legal migration by next summer. And then, of course, on illegal migration, we will continue the work to stop the gangs that are bringing people over. We've already arrested 1,000 people, serving many hundreds of years of jail time. We've speeded up processing in the Home Office by 300%. But the critical thing is, the question each party has to answer is, what do you do with people who are here, no right to be here, but you can't return to their country of origin? For us, we've developed options like the Rwanda scheme. That is ready to go. The first flight is due to take off on the 24th of July. That is critical, and we can't solve this problem without those sorts of things. We're not an outlier. Many nations are doing that. It's the way ahead, and Labour have said they'd scrap it even if it is working, which is crazy. And then the fourth element to security is energy security. We are the only party that are saying yes to North Sea oil and gas. We have got a great story to tell on renewables. The first, second, third, fourth and fifth largest wind farms in the world, the first nation in the world to halve its emissions. And we're doing great stuff in Portsmouth on tidal. That's becoming more competitive. But in the interim, while we transition to those new technologies, we've got to keep the lights on. And I want to keep those lights on with homegrown energy, not having to import it, not being reliant on other nations. That doesn't make us secure. What we're also doing is, to meet the 2050 net zero targets, which we are committed to, we're doing it at a steadier pace. And that's important because the only way you get that transition is to allow people enough money to buy into new technology, but to make that technology desirable and practical for people. If you do it too fast, you just pile costs onto people, and you also don't create homegrown supply chains. So on Labour's plans, we know they'll have to go to China, to other nations to get batteries, to get component parts. We want to do it at a pace that we build that manufacturing here at home. That makes us energy secure.
So where's the money coming from? Where's that new money coming from?
Absolutely. So we are going to be spending more than the Labour Party. We're spending more to deliver those tax cuts, but also we're making sure that public services are being properly supported. But we don't have a gap in our spending. The Labour Party have a £38.5 billion gap, which they're still trying to explain how they're going to fill. But ours, our costings don't have a gap. And so we're actually going to be raising money, as well as growing the economy and all those other things, and making efficiency savings. So there is some spending in there that's purely funded by productivity and efficiency. Our defence uplift, for example, is done by that, on reducing some civil service headcount. But we are also, our two big ways we're going to raise money and get that headroom is to control welfare spending. We're going to find £12 billion worth of welfare spending, which sounds a lot, but we have done it before. We did it in 2015 whilst getting 4.1 million people into work. So we're going to be cutting welfare in order to cut taxes on working people. Labour are going to be putting up taxes to fund the welfare bill. And then the other big chunk is we're going to find £6 billion from cracking down on tax avoidance and evasion, which again sounds like a very high number, but it is actually consistent with what we have been doing year on year. Our average amount that we've been managing to get in from tax evasion and avoidance each year is each parliament is 6.7 billion. So we think we can do that, and that's our track record, and that is how we will fund tax cuts, which are really important, because unless we give people the liquidity to be able to have that financial security, then we can't keep this recovery going. We need to keep that going. What will choke it off is households being in financial dire straits, and our businesses in particular not being able to create jobs. We can't put the burdens on them that Labour are planning, and we can't increase taxes on them either.
And just to confirm to our viewers, the full candidates list for Portsmouth North are, of course, for the Conservative Party, Penny Mordaunt; for Labour, Amanda Martin; for the Liberal Democrats, Simon Dodd; for the Green Party, Duncan Robinson; and for Reform, Melvin Dodd.
Very interesting interview, Simon. Obviously, as a former Conservative Party member, there felt to me like a return to fiscal conservatism, which you know, I obviously you would expect me at this point to give it a double thumbs up.
I'm struck by if I had £1 every time a political party said that the other political party has made unfunded spending commitments or unfunded tax cuts, has a black hole. So they all seem to say it about each other, and I guess all that leaves you with is not knowing basically which is true or not, because not being funny, most of the public are not economists and don't know how to make sense of the weird and wonderful bar charts or tables that are at the back of some manifestos stroke contracts. But I guess to me as the quoting a bit of West Wing, as the saying goes, there are two types of election campaigns, and the Conservatives are running the first one and Labour are running the second one. The first one is don't risk everything by changing now. The recovery is too fragile, and the Labour Party are it's rubbish. It's time for change.
Yes, yeah, and I think it would be fair to say that all four parties are pushing the change agenda. That it is time to change, and I think the core message, I guess, in the conservative offering was, which I sort of picked up on, was very much there have been two massive kind of shocks to the overall system, COVID and the war in Ukraine, which we are recovering from, and here's where it goes next. So I think, for me as an overall, there we have all of the candidates for me have spoken with passion about the what they believe is the reason to vote for their party, and I think that for me is the positive element of, or the very positive element of this campaign. As you say, whilst in there's a little bit, yes, but what about the other people? I think the vast majority of all five were, this is what we can do for you. And so for me, there is that element of encouraging people to vote for something rather than to vote against something.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess again, first past the post might force people to do the latter in some situations, because in some constituencies, the previously elected person was elected with such a majority, and you're either in favour of the type of government that person supports, or you're not. So you're either voting. I guess you're doing one of three things, aren't you? You're either voting to have more of the same, or you're voting for whoever is the most likely to basically to replace that person, or you're voting for who you want to vote for anyway, regardless of whoever they are, because the political mathematics don't counter in your decision, and that if I knew what the answer to that one was, well, I'd be doing different things on a Sunday evening.
Exactly. So we will be back next Sunday with just 4 days to go, with our final show before the general election, where I'm sure we will cast the runes and look at the final run into the election. But until then, you've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sainsbury, and our gracious thanks to our 5 interviewees today. That was Mark Zimmer from Reform UK, Elliot Lee from the Greens, Bella Hewitt from the Liberal Democrats, Stephanie Harvey from Labour, and Penny Mordaunt from the Conservatives. Please do make sure, if you do not have photo ID yet, 5 p.m. on the 26th of June is your last day to apply for free photo ID, and also indeed the same date and time to apply for a proxy. It is now too late to register for a postal vote and too late to register to vote in July's election. You're just going to have to sit from the sidelines and eat your popcorn and not have a say. So thanks very much for watching the show today. See you next week at 6:27. Please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, comment, etc., and we'll see you then.
Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook,